Who is he now backing and why? A 4-year-old girl and 2 women were shot in New York's Times Square. Police say the victims were innocent bystanders when a dispute near them erupted into gunfire. And Congressman Devin Nunes hosted the first Freedom Festival in California. Several prominent conservative speakers joined, including Donald Trump Jr. and California's Republican candidate for governor. They're working to pull out even more Republican votes in the liberal state. The top House Republican is now backing Representative Elise Stefanik for GOP conference chair. It's amid a dispute over the party's support for former President Trump and its messaging going forward.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy endorsed Elise Stefanik Sunday for taking over Liz Cheney's position as House Republican conference chair. He told Fox News that Cheney's criticism of former President Trump is a distraction his party can't afford at this time.
We are in one of our biggest battles ever for this nation and the direction whether this next century will be ours.
He said the conference chair is one of the most critical jobs as a messenger going forward.
That's why we need a conference chair that is delivering that message day in and day out and uniting the nation to make sure that we are on the right footing going forward.
Do you support Elise Stefanik for that job?
Yes, I do.
Stefanik told Breitbart News over the weekend what she would do differently than Cheney. She said, number one, she would listen to voters across the country, pointing out that around 47% voted for Trump.
I would also spend the time listening to the members of the conference and making sure that we're representing the majority of the Republican conference's views. And when you're not able to do that anymore, you should step down from those leadership positions.
She said the conference chair speaks for the team. It's not an opportunity to share personal views. And the Republican Party of Weber County, Utah, voted to censure Senator Mitt Romney over the weekend. It's for voting to convict Trump in the second impeachment trial earlier this year. One of the sponsors told The Standard he wants to make Romney aware of how his vote divided the party. The formal statement of disapproval does not remove Romney from office. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
We reached out to Senator Romney's office for comment, but we haven't heard back yet. 3 bystanders were shot in New York's Times Square, one just 4 years old. The incident took place in broad daylight on a Saturday afternoon.
Police say a dispute between up to 4 men erupted in gunfire, hitting 3 people nearby. One of the victims is a child.
We have a female Hispanic, 4 years old, from Brooklyn, shot in the leg and expected to undergo surgery at Bellevue Hospital.
Another victim is a tourist.
We have a 23-year-old female tourist from Rhode Island.
The third victim is a 43-year-old woman from New Jersey. Police and ambulances rushed to the scene through the crowded streets. An officer carried the injured child to the ambulance. CBS reports that Kieran Dillon is the suspected gunman. They say he is known to police as an illegal street vendor in the area and that his brother was the intended victim. A manhunt is now underway for the alleged gunman. Police are asking the public to report any information they have about the incident.
We have a picture of one person of interest that we have put out on NYPD News on our Twitter page, as well as a video. If you go there, you will see it.
The incident happened just as New York's beginning to open to visitors since easing lockdown restrictions. But gun violence is surging in the city, and the police budget is down by $1 billion. Former New York City Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik tells NTD's The Nation Speaks that the city's leadership is enabling the spike in crime by effectively handcuffing police officers.
The men and women in the NYPD, they know their job, and they know it really well. They're the best trained police officers in the entire world. Let them do their job.
Kerik says New York Mayor Bill de Blasio's attempts to reform policing have failed.
The White House is working closely with Colonial Pipeline to get an oil line back up and running normally. The company fell victim to a recent ransomware attack, forcing it to shut down a critical fuel network supplying eastern states. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
An effort to avoid more fuel supply disruptions is underway. The Biden administration joined forces with Colonial Pipeline this weekend. It's aiming to help restart the company's more than 5,000-mile pipeline network from Texas to New Jersey. The line transports roughly 2.5 million barrels of gasoline and other fuels daily. Colonial said on Sunday its main fuel lines remain offline, but some smaller lines between terminals and delivery points are now operational. U.S. gasoline futures jumped to over $2.20 a gallon. more than 3%, as trading opened for the week. That's its highest point since May 2018.
Now, I expect that this Sunday evening, if Colonial Pipeline is still not running, those futures prices are going to rise another 3 to 5 cents a gallon. But let's keep in mind the impact is limited into the mid-Atlantic and southeast states.
Its extensive pipeline network serves major U.S. airports, including Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, the world's busiest by passenger traffic. The hackers are suspected to be part of a professional cybercriminal group called DarkSide.
But as these industries transform, we're seeing a lot of digital transformation across every industrial company in the world. As those things transform, realize you're exposing yourself to new vulnerability, you're exposing yourself to new access for these adversaries.
The groups first attack by gaining access to private networks, then they encrypt files, and often steal data. They demand payment to decrypt the files, and have started asking for additional money. That's in exchange for not publishing stolen content. Colonial declined to comment on whether DarkSide hackers were involved in the attack, when the breach occurred, or what ransom they demanded. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A group of Congress members is pushing for funds from the latest stimulus bill to go towards combating the opioid epidemic. The bipartisan effort is seeking the go-ahead from the Treasury Department.
The group of 7 is made up of both Republican and Democrat Congress members. They sent a letter of request to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. In it, they asked that states be allowed to use funds from the American Rescue Plan to combat the worsening overdose crisis. They wrote that state and local governments are on the front lines of responding to overdoses, a crisis intensified by the pandemic, adding that they need maximum flexibility to use every resource available to them to provide mental health and addiction treatment supports. The $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan allocates $350 billion for state and local governments. The money is intended to ease financial issues stemming from the pandemic, but the Treasury Department has not yet detailed how exactly states can spend the funds. Further guidance is under development. Early data from the CDC indicates drug overdose deaths in the U.S. continued climbing into September 2020, the most recent month data is available for. Opioids are the leading class of drugs that cause overdoses. They include drugs like heroin and synthetic opioids like fentanyl, plus some prescription pain relievers like OxyContin. A number of experts have blamed the increase in overdose cases on extended lockdowns and the pandemic. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Congressman Devin Nunes hosted his first Freedom Festival over the weekend. A large crowd heard from several prominent conservative speakers, including Donald Trump Jr. and California's Republican candidate for governor, Kevin Faulconer. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the highlights.
Nearly 2,000 people gathered both online and in person for Representative Nunes' first ever Freedom Festival. It was a fundraising event for conservatives as they worked to take back the House in 2022. And California's Republican gubernatorial candidate Kevin Faulconer also pitched his bid for governor.
I also get the question, can a Republican win statewide California? The answer is yes, absolutely yes. And you're looking at somebody who's a proud Republican who won in the second largest city in California, a majority Democrat city. And I won for 2 terms.
Congressman Nunes suggested that the reason a record number of Californians are racing for the exits is because of what he calls Governor Newsom's socialist absurdism. California saw a population decline this year, which has never happened before. It costed the state a seat in the House.
The message matters, right? And we're seeing it at the national level, a shift in mentality, and I think people are realizing that the candidates do matter.
He was the first Republican in 2 decades to take a seat back from a California Democrat. Now the GOP is working to flip another one. And Donald Trump Jr. confirmed former President Trump is a big part of that effort.
And I know he's focusing closely on these races in the House and the Senate. What's he doing right now in those races?
Watching very closely, trying to figure out the candidates that are truly going to be America first, trying to weed out the rhinos,
Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe joined in too, sharing some of the group's key findings on exposing the special interests of mainstream media.
Hello, everyone. I don't know that Trump would have got voted out. Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right?
O'Keefe said they get lots of support from whistleblowers and undercover reporters, and he adds that soon there will be some anchors working with them who will go public, blowing the whistle on their own news networks. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
We have an update and some analysis on the FBI's probe into Rudy Giuliani. The Justice Department says the evidence the FBI seized from Giuliani should be reviewed by an outside lawyer. That's because federal prosecutors say there may be issues that arise from the unusually sensitive attorney-client privilege information between him and Trump on the devices. Earlier, I spoke with political analyst Patrick Basham about the nature of the raid and whether the mainstream media's false reporting was deliberate misinformation or simply malpractice.
Well, at a minimum, it's malpractice. We see again and again the incompetence of mainstream media outlets, the New York Times, Washington Post being prime examples of that, CNN being another prime example, obviously. There's a litany of errors here. One would like to think, if I can put it in these terms, it is only about incompetence. But the incompetence is so legion. There are so many examples over such a period of time, especially towards President Trump and those of his inner circle, including Rudy Giuliani. It's hard after a while not to become more cynical and think that this isn't simply incompetence. It might actually be conscious misinformation.
Now, Patrick, given that Rudy Giuliani was a key player in Trump's push to have Ukraine investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter surrounding Burisma Holdings, do you think the FBI raid is a political retaliation now that Joe Biden is president?
From the outside, it appears crystal clear that this is a political retaliation against Giuliani and against Trump and the Trump inner circle more broadly defined. What has happened with the FBI clearly over the past several years, at a minimum, is that the FBI has been weaponized for political purposes. In recent years, that has been primarily against Trump and those surrounding him. What the FBI is trying to do here is not, I think, so much get Rudy Giuliani, but get compromising information, if it exists, on Donald Trump and others in Trump's inner circle.
A town attorney says former President Trump can legally live at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. The ruling pointed to a 1993 agreement made when the property was first converted into a private club. Trump has been living at Mar-a-Lago since leaving the White House, but Palm Beach Daily News reports that an attorney representing Trump's neighbors has drawn issue with the arrangement. The lawyer argued earlier that Trump residing at the property violates an agreement while at the same time posing a security risk and devaluing nearby properties. The Palm Beach town manager says the ruling was based on an agreement that allows Trump to live at the club as a bona fide employee. According to Trump's attorney, the former president's duties at Mar-a-Lago include managing the property, among other roles. And just ahead, a Hall of Fame horse trainer is suspended after his horse gets caught with too much of an illegal steroid in his system. He admits no wrongdoing. And a Major League Baseball returns for a full season. Fans in the San Diego cheer Padres as California and other states ease pandemic restrictions. That and more here on NTD News. Horse racing trainer Bob Baffert denies all wrongdoing after his suspension. His Kentucky Derby winning horse was found to test positive for illegal substances.
I'm the most scrutinized trainer, and I have millions of eyes on me. But you know what? I don't have a problem with that. And the last thing I want to do is do something that would jeopardize the greatest 2 minutes in sports.
The trainer said his racehorse, Medina Spirit, was found with more than double the allowed amount of a certain steroidin in its system during post-race training. It puts the horse's May 1st win at the Kentucky Derby in question. The only case of a horse being disqualified over substances after winning a Kentucky Derby was back in 1968. Carjacking in Chicago has skyrocketed since last November. The number in January was the highest since 2001. But recent community effort has significantly reduced vehicle theft across the city.
Bronzeville is the historic center of Black culture in Chicago. An organization named WatchGuard is a community volunteer group now patrolling the streets. The founder, Marquin McDonald, sees Bronzeville as a village that men need to step up to protect.
So to gather the men in the community, to come out and look after the community to make sure that it's safe for women and children to come outside, I think is what's needed.
McDonald tells NTD his team started patrols 5 years ago, but a more concerted effort was launched last May.
Last year, when we had a lot of the unrest or looting happening in the community, is when we decided that we would go out every night, as well as come out on the weekends.
Now, WatchGuard has 10 to 25 volunteers patrolling gas stations in the community every day.
We had a car pull in, 3 people got out, and they're all about to fight each other. 2 of our members was able to de-escalate that situation, calm the energy, calm the tensions. The police didn't have to get involved.
McDonald is a martial arts instructor of 37 years. He uses martial tactics to alleviate conflicts.
Because what you learn is by connecting internally and coming outward, you start to impact everything that surrounds you. And when I really listen to self, I can actually hear I know what the community needs. I'm able to help recognize and understand the trauma or the pain or the needs of the people in the community.
Having grown up in Bronzeville, McDonald says certain people don't want to see an end to the difficulties.
But based off of my experience and what I've seen, poverty is profitable. Pain and misery is profitable. And what do I mean by that? You have organizations out here. You have quote-unquote leaders, people who claim to be activists, people who claim that they care about the community. Let's just say the violence happens to end. Well, then there's no need for these organizations anymore. And whoever's organization it is, they lose a paycheck.
According to the Chicago Police Department, carjackings rose through 2020 but have dropped by 80% from January to March.
One of America's largest fire safety product suppliers is recalling hundreds of thousands of smoke detectors. That's because they don't actually alert customers to fires. They were made by manufacturer Kidde. Affected models are the company's TrueSense smoke alarms and combination smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. They were sold at retailers like Walmart, Home Depot, and Amazon between May of 2019 and last September. No incidents have been reported yet, but people with these alarms should contact the company for a replacement that works. Write down this URL because it doesn't appear to be linked from Kidde's main page. Visit kiddetsalarmrecall.rsvpcomm.com to submit a claim. The company promises to send replacements within 3 days of receiving claims. Coming up, an Olympic wrestler trains in a former chicken coop. The 3-time world champion hopes to win a medal in the upcoming Tokyo Games this summer. That and more here on NTD News.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
Kids will be kids, which just goes to say kids will be curious. They get into everything. If there's a loaded firearm in the house, they could get their hands on that too. Keeping firearms locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition in a place inaccessible to kids can help keep your loved ones safe from family fire. Safe gun storage saves lives.
Major League Baseball is showing some signs of an economic recovery. That's after a year on the sidelines. But the revival has been as speedy as some have hoped. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Saturday night in downtown San Diego, J Street near Petco Park Stadium was humming. Padres fans packed the bars and restaurants after a year stuck inside.
I think a lot of bars and restaurants were severely impacted by the shutdowns, and now that those that have fortunately survived are able to take advantage that they're still here and open their doors to people willing to spend money.
The scene was festive, but it highlighted some of the limits of the economy's recovery. The Padres have been selling out almost every game since Major League Baseball's reopening a month ago, but there's an attendance cap of around 15,000, roughly a third of stadium capacity. The surrounding restaurants remain limited to 50% capacity in California for at least another month. Opening day with over 160 games on tap was a milestone for the nation's reopening. Texas and Florida have repealed all pandemic restrictions. New York is allowing restaurants to reopen at full capacity on May 19th, and California plans to lift most remaining restrictions on June 15th.
It was like a ghost town. This same time last year was depressing, and I felt bad that all the businesses took such a hard hit. But now that everything's opened up, San Diego's thriving, and we encourage everybody to come out, support the community, support the city.
Yet some are still hesitant, and that lack of confidence may slow economic recovery. The 30 MLB stadiums are selling an average of just under 75% of available seats at the allowed capacity. That's compared to an average attendance of 67% at fully open stadiums before the pandemic. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
American Olympic sprinter Justin Gatlin speaks about his experience in Japan for test events leading up to the Games. Japan is using the event to test pandemic bubble safety measures.
I felt beyond safe. I've been tested every day, either saliva or nasal swab every morning. The bubble has been very successful. The only time I've ever seen the outside is when we get on the bus to go to the track. We work out, then we go back to the hotel.
Gatlin said he and other competitors had to eat all of their meals in their hotel rooms. He says the adjustment could be tough, and not all athletes will be happy with the bubble restrictions. The pre-Olympics test events involved 420 athletes, including 9 who traveled from abroad. A world champion wrestler in Germany is training for the Olympics in an unusual space. He was forced to get creative because of local closures. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Frank Stabler, a 3-time wrestling world champion, is training hard for his dream of an Olympic medal. And in this former chicken coop, a champion is being made. Stabler's friends and family helped him to transform the former henhouse in his parents' farm in southern Germany into a wrestling room.
Welcome to my own residential investment world camp, the old henhouse where my grandpa cared for his chickens. Just imagine over here were the boxes for breeding, and if you listen very closely, and sometimes when I'm really down and exhausted, I can hear them cackle.
His old club had to close the doors due to the pandemic, and the athletes had nowhere to train. Stabler won the 3rd gold of his career in the 72-kilogram category when the 2018 World Championships were held in Budapest. Having failed to win medals at London 2012 and Rio de Janeiro 2016, Stabler wants one more chance at an Olympic medal in Japan. Stabler caught the CCP virus last October. The 31-year-old struggled to breathe and estimates his lung capacity was 20% down compared to before he fell ill.
I was totally cut off from any air. I felt like I was being strangled within my body. I couldn't breathe anymore. My lungs and bronchial tubes collapsed. I was full of pain, and I could not believe what was happening.
Now Stabler does some 17 breathing exercises per week. He'll also need to keep up with his cardio, so he doesn't gas in the 3rd period. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. I'm Kevin Hogan.
have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.